They say the truth always prevails, but for Michael Jackson, the lie traveled far faster than his absolute acquittal. Despite a jury throwing out all 14 felony counts, a massive media brainwashing campaign successfully warped his legacy for decades. Today, that curtain of deception is finally being torn down. But to truly grasp the devastating cost of this fame, the timeline must be rewound to long before the flashbulbs. It all started in a working-class neighborhood in Indiana, where Michael Joseph Jackson was robbed of his youth, molded into an entertainment machine. At just 5 years old, Michael Joseph Jackson entered the world on August 29, 1958, in a cramped 700-square-foot house on Jackson Street in Gary, Indiana. In a home packed with 9 children, life was a survival game dictated by his father Joe, a steel mill worker with iron expectations. While other children scraped their knees on playgrounds, Michael was forced into grueling midnight rehearsals. If he missed a single vocal cue or a dance step, the consequence wasn't a scolding, it was the crack of his father's belt. He learned the choreography of survival long before he ever mastered the moonwalk. The cost of this early fame was absolute. Michael has admitted that the sight of his father would often make him physically ill with terror. He spent his youth in the back of tour buses, breathing in thick cigarette smoke and staring out at a world he was never allowed to join. This was the root wound, a boy who was taught that love was conditional-based, entirely on his ability to perform perfectly under the threat of violence. He became the primary breadwinner for an entire empire before he even lost his baby teeth. When he cried, he was told to wipe his tears and smile for the cameras. Then came a deeper betrayal, this time from his own biology. When vitiligo began stripping the pigment from his skin, he was mortified. He used heavy theatrical makeup and his signature single glove, not as fashion statements, but as shields for medical tragedy. Yet the media ignored the medical facts. They preferred a more profitable lie. They accused him of surgically bleaching his skin to reject his heritage, transforming a painful disease into a lucrative freak show. They stripped him of his right to be a human being, making him a stranger to his own reflection. This constant public ridicule forced Michael to retreat from a society that refused to see his humanity. He realized the only way to survive was to build his own world, a private sanctuary where the cruelty of the headlines could not reach him. The Neverland ranch he eventually built wasn't an eccentric playground. It was a multi-million-dollar attempt to buy back the decade he lost in Indiana. He surrounded himself with Ferris wheels and cotton candy machines because he was still that 5-year-old boy starving for a playdate he was never permitted to have. He didn't grow up to be a superstar. He was forged in a furnace of fear and then sold to a world that never intended to let him heal. By 1982, the boy from Gary had become a global stimulus package. With the release of Thriller, Michael Jackson didn't just break records. He became the metric by which the world measured greatness. The numbers were astronomical: 70 million copies sold, 8 Grammy Awards in a single night, and a $100 million contract with Pepsi. When he debuted the moonwalk at Motown 25, he executed a cultural shift that froze the planet. He was no longer a man. He was a phenomenon, a walking deity in a sequined glove. He donated millions to burn centers and hospitals, building a reputation as the world's most generous healer. He visited orphanages in every country he toured, holding the hands of dying children while the cameras captured the king of pop as a pure saintly figure. But at the summit of this golden mountain, the air began to thin. The first crack in the armor appeared in 1984 during the filming of a Pepsi commercial. A pyrotechnic accident set his hair on fire, causing second and third degree burns to his scalp. This was the moment the physical pain became permanent, leading to a lifelong dependency on heavy medications to manage the agony and the insomnia. He retreated into a hall of mirrors. His team, desperate to keep him in the headlines, leaked bizarre stories to the press. The hyperbaric oxygen chamber, the attempt to buy the bones of the Elephant Man, the companionship of a chimpanzee named Bubbles. It was a calculated marketing strategy that backfired with historic brutality. The media, having tasted the blood of eccentricity, stopped seeing him as a legend and began branding him Wacko Jacko. They transformed his privacy into a freak show and his kindness into a target. He earned $20 million per tour, but he spent it building a fortress of solitude. He was a god on stage, but a ghost in his own life. The shattering began in 1993 with a phone call that would define the rest of his life. Evan Chandler, a dentist struggling with debt, accused Michael of abusing his son Jordan, but the truth was hidden in a recorded conversation that the jury never heard in the civil trial. In that recording, Evan Chandler said plainly, "If I go through with this, I win big. I will get everything I want, and he will be destroyed." This wasn't a quest for justice. It was a $20 million shakedown. Michael, in the middle of a grueling world tour and suffering from severe dehydration and addiction to painkillers, was pressured by his insurance company to settle the civil suit for $15 million. The world saw the settlement as a confession. The truth was far more clinical. A settlement is a business decision, not a legal verdict. Despite a strip search that Michael described as the most humiliating moment of his life, the LAPD and the FBI found absolutely no forensic evidence to support its single charge. The investigation went cold, but the media's hunger only intensified. For the next 10 years, Michael was the most investigated man in human history. The FBI kept a secret file on him for over a decade, spanning 300 pages of surveillance, witness interviews, and financial tracking. They found nothing. Not one piece of contraband, not one victim, and not one shred of incriminating data. Yet the tabloids continued to manufacture a monster because Michael Jackson's face on a cover sold more papers than 1,000 wars. Then came 2003, the second siege. Martin Bashir, a journalist who betrayed Michael's trust, released a documentary that framed his friendship with the Arvizo family in the darkest possible light. Gavin Arvizo, a boy who had survived stage 4 cancer after Michael funded his medical treatment, became the face of a new criminal trial. District Attorney Tom Snedden, who had been obsessed with catching Michael since 1993, launched a military-style raid on Neverland Ranch with 70 armed officers. They x-rayed the walls and confiscated thousands of items, searching for the secret rooms and pornography the press had promised existed. They found Disney movies, Peter Pan books, and classical art. The 2005 trial was a 13-week public execution. The Arvizo family's testimony collapsed under cross-examination when it was revealed they had a long history of filing fraudulent lawsuits for money. They had praised Michael as a savior weeks before accusing him of being a predator. On June 13, 2005, a jury of 12 ordinary citizens heard every piece of evidence the government had. They delivered a unanimous verdict, not guilty, on all 14 felony counts. Michael walked out of that courtroom a free man, but the media had already signed his death warrant. They ignored the acquittal and focused on his gaunt appearance and his pajamas, ensuring that even in victory, he looked like a villain. The final act of this media hoax arrived a decade after his death with the 2019 film, Leaving Neverland. The accusers, Wade Robson and James Safechuck, presented a narrative that horrified the world. But as investigators began tilting the branch, the lies fell away. Wade Robson had testified under oath in 2005 that Michael had never touched him. He only changed his story after being denied a job in a Michael Jackson-themed Cirque du Soleil show and subsequently filing a lawsuit for $1.5 billion against the estate. The film's most chilling evidence abuse in a train station was debunked by municipal records showing the train station wasn't even built until years after the alleged events. The press didn't need a guilty verdict. They only needed a guilty headline. They built an industry out of his destruction, realizing that Michael Jackson was worth more to them as a monster than as a man. He spent his final years in a state of hypervigilance, unable to sleep without the strongest surgical anesthetics, a direct result of the trauma inflicted by decades of public hunting. He wasn't a criminal. He was a man who gave $300 million to charities and died in debt because he couldn't stop trying to fix a world that was busy tearing him apart. The real crime wasn't what he did, but what the world did to him for the sake of a headline. He was acquitted by the law, but he was executed by the narrative. The end arrived on June 25th, 2009, not with a roar, but with a clinical, terrifying silence in a rented mansion in Holmby Hills. Michael Jackson's heart stopped under the weight of propofol, a powerful surgical anesthetic he used not to get high, but to find the only escape from a world that had become a relentless hunting ground. He was 50 years old, preparing for a comeback residency titled, "This Is It," a desperate attempt to reclaim his dignity and clear his staggering debts. He died an innocent man by every legal metric available, yet he was carrying the psychological scars of 1,000 tabloid lashes. The coroner's report confirmed what his fans had always known. His body was a roadmap of suffering, a fragile vessel that had survived vitiligo cosmetic surgeries and chronic pain, but could no longer survive the crushing expectation of being Michael Jackson. The global reaction was unprecedented. 2.5 billion people watched his memorial service, a moment when the planet stood still to acknowledge that the king of pop was gone. But even in death, the media hoax refused to rest. The narrative had become too profitable to abandon. For 15 years, the estate and the fans have fought a war of attrition against a tabloid industry that refuses to let the truth get in the way of a legacy-killing headline. The 2019 release of Leaving Neverland was the final attempt to bury him in shame. But this time, the world had the tools to fight back. Investigators and fans began cross-referencing the film's claims against public records, uncovering the staggering timeline errors and the financial motives behind the $1.5 billion lawsuits filed by the accusers. The hoax finally met its match, a digital era where court records are accessible and lies have a shelf life. Michael Jackson's real legacy is not the scandal, but the endurance of his art. Despite a decades-long campaign to cancel his music, his estate remains the most successful in history, generating billions of dollars and proving that the world's connection to his soul is stronger than any manufactured controversy. The FBI's 300-page file released after his death remains the ultimate vindication. 10 years of surveillance, wiretaps, and international investigation yielded zero evidence of criminal behavior. The American government spent millions of taxpayer dollars trying to find a monster, only to find a man who spent his nights reading books and his days trying to save the planet. This is the ultimate lesson of the Michael Jackson story. Innocence is a liability in a world that thrives on the destruction of icons. His Ngai Vang was a gilded cage, and his kindness was a currency that the media spent until he was bankrupt. He didn't die because of a medical mistake. He died because he had been stripped of his humanity for 40 years. He was the boy who never grew up because the world never allowed him to heal from the wounds of Gary, Indiana. He was the man who tried to heal the world while the world was busy poisoning him. But as the dust of the scandals settles and the court records speak for themselves, the image of the monster is fading. What remains is the man in the mirror. We now see a pioneer who broke racial barriers, a humanitarian who redefined global charity, and a father whose children speak of him with nothing but unconditional love and respect. The media hoax did not win. It only delayed the inevitable realization that Michael Jackson was the most misunderstood human being of the 20th century. Beyond the headlines, the courtrooms, and the cruel nicknames, there is a frequency that the world cannot forget. It is the rhythm of Billie Jean, the message of Man in the Mirror, and the raw, cinematic power of Thriller. Michael Jackson's music was the heartbeat of a generation. It accompanied your first dance, your hardest breakups, and your brightest celebrations. These memories are the only truth that cannot be warped by a tabloid machine. So we ask you, beyond the noise and the lies, what is the one Michael Jackson moment that stayed with you? Was it the first time you saw the moonwalk, or the lyrics of a song that made you feel less alone in the world? Share your memories in the comments below. Let us celebrate the man who gave us everything, even when the world gave him nothing but a trial. Michael Jackson did not die from a heart attack. He died from a broken spirit under the weight of a hoax the world wasn't yet brave enough to admit. But the truth is no longer a secret. It is his final and most important acquittal. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep the truth alive. We will see you in the next one.